Hello and welcome to PM Express Personality Profile. My name is Prince Minka and I'm sitting in for your regular host, Nana Nsakwao the Fourth. Well, today we have a very special guest, and where best to do this than the beautiful, serene atmosphere of Alisa Hotel. Well, our guest here on Personality Profile, he's been to the Navy, he's taught before, and he's still teaching. And you know what? His father was called Killjoy. And if you're wondering why he used to be called that, we'll tell you more about that. But welcome to the program. And yes, Joe Lartey.
Well,
Good.
thank you.
Good to have you on the program.
That's right. I'm happy that you asked me to come to the program. I'm very happy about that. Yep.
Right. And usually when you hear Joe Lartey, the next sentence that comes to mind is, over to you.
Over to you.
We'll get to that shortly.
Yeah, that's right. That's
Tell
right.
us a bit more about yourself.
Yeah, well, I'm 87 years old.
I was
you're
87. Really young.
I was 87 on the 6th of June this month. You know, and I had a very soft infancy. My parents were very fond of me because I turned out to be the only child between them. There were two. The one after me died at the age of 7. Then I was 9. And the love that I should have shared with my younger brother all came to me. And my father was so careful. He wanted to make sure that I did not die like my brother. And so he was very protective. He wouldn't allow me to engage in anything that could involve a risk, either of injury or of death. So I wasn't allowed
So you weren't even allowed to play football?
No, I wasn't allowed to play football.
Why?
I wasn't allowed to do anything sport.
Yes.
I joined the school band at the time, Accra Government Boys School. And you know what he did?
You tell me.
He went straight to the headmaster, who was then Master H.M. Grant, and asked him to take me out of the band because he was a leader of the Methodist Church. My mother was also a leader. And his contention was that the son of leaders of the Methodist Church should not play drums. You can imagine, we shouldn't play drum. I was playing a side drum in the band. So I was cashiered from the band straight away.
How was it like playing the instruments in the church? I mean, the drum and...
Oh, well, it was interesting. I loved music, you know, and I thought I was going to develop music. And I had chances to learn music. But once again, the old band did not allow me to do it. Because at that time, most musicians...
But there was nothing injurious about, you know, being in the band.
Yeah, that's why I'm telling you the story. In those days, at that time, most musicians were layabouts, dropouts from school and things. They went into music and sport. You can't believe it. Today, sport is the thing. Look at our footballers, right, what they are earning. But in those days, most of the people who didn't do very well went into footballing and music and so on. So my dad was against it. My brother-in-law had a piano, and he decided to teach me to play the piano because he said my fingers are long and I could do it better. And he stopped me. He stopped me from playing the piano.
That was like the criteria.
Yeah, well,
the piano.
well, yes, that's right. Yeah, and I had to stop.
Right.
And so many other things he did, just to protect me. And so when I broke away and joined the British Navy, he had a terrible shock. In fact, he nearly went mad.
Before we even get to the
yeah,
Navy,
that's right.
Let's talk about those times that you wanted to be adventurous and get yourself involved in all these, as in the band and probably soccer and other activities.
Yeah, yeah.
How did you feel about your father's overprotectiveness?
Well, I didn't feel good. One, because I didn't understand his motives. Two, because as a young person, I wanted to get going. I wanted to do what my mates were doing. I wanted to be involved. And I remember that on one occasion, I was seriously ill and admitted to a clinic owned by a man called Dr. Duncan Bruce at Jamestown. And the doctor told my dad that he should allow me to do what other children do in order to get my health going. You know, and,
But
and,
you
and,
wouldn't
yeah, they wouldn't listen.
But did you at a point ever feel that your dad did not like you?
Well, yes, at a point I thought it was
It's
too
natural, but
intrusive,
that
too
was-
troublesome.
Yeah.
And that was one of the motives that drove me into the Navy.
Okay.
The discipline at home was severe. But you see, when I got into the Navy, I found that it was a question of from the frying pan to the fire. The Navy was discipline. Yeah.
And so you're more like prepared.
Well, yes, of course. I was able to endure
Right.
the naval discipline because I had a foundation, you know, at home. And it worked well for me.
So were you able to draw a connection to your father's overprotectiveness to your experience in the Navy and say, look, Dad was really helping me?
Yeah. Well, I thought rather that the Navy made me what I am today. The foundation I had in the Navy, in discipline, in focusing, in even educating myself. We were exposed to what you now call long distance education. We were young boys who had run into the Navy, and they wanted to help us. Not only the Navy, the Army, the Air Force, the armed forces. They had educational departments, and people who had got into the various arms of the armed forces were being helped to further their education, because some of them were conscripted from universities and colleges to go and fight in those days. So they were given a chance to educate themselves while still fighting. And I benefited from it.
And so it was an educational experience, and apart from that, what about morality? I mean,
Yes,
in terms of
morality,
building
yes.
your moral-
Morality was hammered into us. You had to be on your guard all
How
the
did they
time.
do that?
Yeah,
This
I
is the
mean,
Navy you're
yes, the
talking
Navy.
about.
The Navy, the British Navy is different from the Merchant Navy.
Okay.
The Merchant Navy, they had discipline, but they were freer to do what they liked most of the time. In the British Navy, you had strict discipline because the misbehavior of one person on the ship can involve the lives of everybody. And they kept to it. Things like punctuality, orderliness when you wake up in the morning, what you do immediately after. There's a strict timetable that you follow. And this builds you up. It builds you up. The drills we had to drill on the pitch. We were trained for 6 months ashore before we were posted to ships. So by the time you got on board, you knew your right from your left.
Okay.
And it was no joke. It was no joke working on the battleship. It was no joke at all.
And seeing weapons.
Yes,
all
of
kinds.
course. You have to train the use of weapons, in mounting guards on board ship, in scanning the oceans with binoculars and things like that. I mean, no joke at all, I can tell you.
Talk about joke. There's this joke about people from, the northern part of Ghana, and the fact that they've not seen the sea before, and when they see the sea for the first time, they get a bit frightened. I don't know. You tell us a bit more about where you came from, and your first experience at sea, and getting closer to weapons and warships and all that.
My experience with the sea started from my infancy because I was born very close to the sea at Koligono. My father's house is not too far from the sea. And so I became acquainted with the sea very early in my life, although I wasn't allowed to swim. Yeah, my dad wouldn't allow me to go
That
swimming.
was considered injurious.
Yes, it was very risky, and even now, it's very risky trying to swim along the Koligono beach because we have some rocks in the sea, and a lot of people collect sand from the sea, creating artificial holes and things. And if you get into one of them, you could be taken away.
Right.
So I wasn't allowed to swim. I learned to swim when I joined the Navy.
So what was your first experience like?
Swimming.
The first swimming.
Well,
Task
like
for you at the
everybody, I was frightened. I was only 16 when I joined the Navy, and a boy. So, in terms of today, people would describe me as what do you call it? A soldier boy.
Right.
But in the world, they wanted people to fight, so anything went, and we took advantage of it. Yeah.
I know viewers would certainly want to know who killed Joyce, but we'll save that for a while. and let's tap into, the experience that you got at the Navy and what it has taught you.
Yeah, it has taught me discipline. The Navy has taught me discipline. It has taught me self-control. It has taught me mixing with people of different tribes, of different race, and so on. That has shaped me. And today I have no idea about tribalism. I have no idea about racialism. I take everybody as everybody, and we get along. I get along well with people. I've learned to be a good mixer, and it has helped me tremendously, I should tell you that.
And you learned all this because there was some level of enthusiasm when you wanted to get into the Navy.
Yes.
But today, we don't seem to have that. Some people get into certain fields of profession because they obviously may not have a choice or an alternative. And so they end up being, say, teachers or nurses because they couldn't get into the university.
What
would be your suggestion to how we can
well, you need, I went in because I loved adventure. And you see, early on when I was schooling in Tamale, the school had a very big children's library. So I started reading very early. I developed the reading habit very, very early. And I read books like Robinson Crusoe, Treasure Island, Coral Island, and a whole lot of other things. So I developed a liking for the Navy. And then there was one magazine that was published monthly during the war. They called it Picture Post. And it showed episodes from the war, sinking ships, marching sailors, armies working in the battlefield, a whole lot. It covered the war events. And I loved to read that paper. It influenced my thinking. Then I used to listen to speeches by Winston Churchill. Yeah.
Which one do you remember?
Oh, well, I remember when he said, we are at war. We are going to make war and persist in making war until the other side has had enough of it.
How did that particular speech of Winston Churchill influence you?
Well, when I heard this speech, I was already in the Navy, and it was beautiful.
He was talking about war.
Yeah, war. He said, we are at war.
Resilience.
We are going to make war and persist in making war until the other side has had enough of it.
Did you consider yourself as someone who was also at war?
Oh, of course.
With who?
Yes, we were at war with my mates. Yeah.
Which
We were at
All
war.
of them?
I mean, the sailors with whom I worked,
Right.
black and white. We had white sailors from Britain and parts of from South Africa, for instance, white sailors. And we had come from, or we had gone there from West Africa. We had sailors from Gambia, Nigeria, Sierra Leone, all the former British colonies. We were there. And it was a grand mixture of people. And we had to accommodate one another, So
So you disagreed to agree?
No, well, yes. I mean, look, in the Navy, for the sake of discipline and safety, security, we had a system by which if you had a complaint, if something you didn't like in the Navy or wherever you were serving, you made a request to see the captain and state your complaint. And they looked into it immediately because it was unsafe to carry a disgruntled sailor on the ship. He could put a spanner into the works and there would be plenty of trouble. So they made sure we did not have discontent. And this has taught me a lesson till now. In my dealings with people, I always keep my weather eye open on discontent. Even my children. If you don't look after your children properly, if you don't study them, and they develop discontent, they can sink you.
We'll get to your children.
That's right.
Later.
Yeah.
We'll talk more about them.
Yeah.
But let's still dwell a little further on your experience in the Navy.
Yeah.
And even other areas. I mean, in all this, there's been a lot of talk about your dad What was he all these while? Were you communicating with him?
Yes, he was friendly. But when it came to the things he wanted you to do, there was no compromise. He was a civil servant in the Treasury Department, and they had their office at the National Secretariat, which was sited at the place where you now have the lottery.
Right.
Yeah. So he used to walk at the end of the day, he used to walk from the Secretariat to Accra Government Boys School, which is now Kimbu, and collect me to the house. He wouldn't allow me to go alone with my other children. I saw a cinema for the first time in my life in 1942 when I was in
which one
standard.
was that?
Yeah, there was a
Was it
cinema.
Frankenstein?
No, it was a cinema called Hollywood Canteen.
Oh.
And I remember that Louis Armstrong was in it, Eddie Murphy was in it, and others. They were all in that film. Joe Louis was featured in that film. And when I was going to watch that film, I had an escort. Somebody escorted me from the house to the cinema, and even before the end of the show, I was taken back to the house. So you can imagine.
And you know that you felt uncomfortable. But I was specifically referring to your times in the Navy. Mm-hmm. How were you communicating with your dad?
We were writing letters,
okay,
but our letters were censored because of security. You just didn't write a letter and leave it there. You posted it.
So you didn't have an escort then? So
oh, no. Yeah, free. I was free. I enjoyed freedom for the first time.
It felt good, I guess.
Well, it was good. It was good. You had to learn to use your freedom. Because in the Navy, if you misused your freedom, you were punished severely. For instance, if you went to town, if you went ashore, that was the term we were using. If you went ashore and reported late to your ship, that was serious. They'll punish you well and proper, and you wouldn't like to do it again.
Okay. Now, today, if you were to encourage young ones to go through what you did at the Navy, what would be your specific advice to, say, policymakers in getting young ones to have the Navy experience?
Well, yeah. One of the things I would say, you see, the British Navy, we went in as volunteer reserve. We have the Royal Navy, then we have the Royal Naval Reserve,
so you volunteer.
And then we have the Royal Naval Volunteer Reserve. These three branches. We went in the third, we volunteered to go. Now, what they did was, with the Royal Navy proper, they recruited people, children. They started from the age of 6. They started training. They were made to imbibe the traditions of the Navy. And they were the top. They were the top men. And you know, the royal family of Britain, the royal family, each one of them, or almost all of them, had to go through the Navy for discipline and for other purposes. The Duke of Edinburgh, you know, had his admiral status and so on. Yeah. So here I would advise that if they want to build a very good Navy for Ghana, then the training should start early. They should start training early.
Would you suggest that it be incorporated in the national service?
It's something I've dreamt of most of the time, because during the period of the national service, not only in the Navy, but in any of the branches of the armed forces, the participants will develop discipline, strong sense of duty, and loyalty. If you are found to be disloyal in any of the branches of the armed forces, you'll be kicked out. Yeah, during the war, you could even be court-martialed and shot. You know, it was a fearful thing. So I would advise that instead of sending youngsters to villages and so on, well, it's part of it, but most of them should go through the armed forces to build a solid foundation in discipline, loyalty, and orderliness before they go they continue their jobs. We wouldn't have all the problems we're having today, embezzlements here and there, and indiscipline. I don't want to go further.
Anyway, before we actually take a break, let's save our listeners from this whole suspense of who is Killjoy. We're on Joy News though, but who's been killing your joy?
My dad. My dad was a killjoy. This accolade, what we call it, accolade, was given to my dad by an English friend of mine who was at the university. Yeah, he looked at the way things were going on between my dad and myself, the restrictions and so on. He said, "Oh, your dad is a killjoy, a killjoy." But it wasn't entirely bad. Right. I wouldn't say it was entirely bad.
It's been influential.
Yeah, because if it were entirely bad, I wouldn't be here today.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, so we'll talk a bit more about over to you, Joe Lartey. And certainly it's got to do with his time in broadcasting.
In broadcasting, yeah.
Yes. So stay tuned. This is still Personality Profile here on PM Express. Welcome back. This is still Personality Profile on PM Express on Joy News on Multi TV. I am Prince Mika, sitting in for your regular host, Nanansa Power the Fourth. And yes, we have our guest, Joe Lartey. He's our special guest today, and obviously we've been talking about his life in the Navy. But let's go to a much more interesting part of his life that you all know about. Over to you, Joe Lartey.
Over to you.
Over to you, Joe Lartey.
Yeah.
I mean, that was an accolade you
yeah, what happened was I used to, in my heyday, I used to share commentary with my boss, who was then the late Colonel Festus Adai. Festus went from GBC to the Army, and each time there was commentary, the two of us shared. So at the end of his bit, he would say, "Over to you, Joe." And then at the end of my bit, I'll say, "Over to you, Festus." And this was so constant. You see, during the First Republic under Kwame Nkrumah, there were so many outside broadcasts, so many. So it stuck in the minds of the general public.
Outside broadcasts
that's something like what we are doing now. Right. We are recording outside, not in the studio. Right. So it's an outside broadcast activity. See, and we had a lot of these, commissioning of important places, banquets, state banquets, parades. They were ever there. So the expression "over to you" stuck to the minds of our viewers and listeners. Television came in '65, and we carried on, still doing it. And that's how we now have "Over to You" attached to my name. Yeah.
Over to me, Prince Mika. Let's go back to how you entered broadcasting. Was it something you really wanted to do because you were in the Navy?
Yes, I came out of the Navy and went into teaching.
Okay.
And while in teaching, a mate of mine, I attended Accra Academy at the beginning of my 16th or 15th year in life. And I had a friend there called Bosokpohanu. And Bosokpohanu, he went through the secondary school course and then got a job. He went to Legon, graduated, and he got a job with the GBC. He was in charge of research, listener research. He was the head of a department. So he recommended me to the head of department, that's the head of programs, then of GBC. Because when I was in Accra Academy, I could entertain the whole school. I'll go on the stage and I'll recite poems and sing and do all the funny things. And everybody knew I was very eloquent. So he recommended me to the head of programs, and they started searching for me.
You had a lot of confidence.
Oh yes, of course.
Of speaking.
Yeah, I developed confidence in the Navy, because while I was in the Navy, during our spare time, we used to practice impromptu speaking, just as an entertainment. So by the time I came out of the Navy, I had a basis, and it carried me into teaching. So when the recommendation went, and then they started wooing me to join GBC, and they would come to the school, talk to me behind the scenes, encourage me, and so I went over.
But why was that a major criteria? Because I know for broadcasting, you should have some level of training.
Yes, of course. What they did at the time, not today. When you joined GBC in those days, you were placed on contract for 6 months after you've gone through all the interviews. And during the 6 months, they will establish your suitability for the job. So it wasn't easy. If you were found not fit for the job, they'd send you out.
And so you were trained basically on the
Then
job.
after the 6 months, you go into the training school
Okay.
and train, basic. They call it induction course. You do an induction course and then you begin to practice. And even while practicing, you were still supervised, strictly supervised. If you were going to present a script, a talk, you had to go to the training school and be rehearsed properly. Your pronunciation, your intonation, everything was taken care of. And so, you know, we set very high standards, which unfortunately I see crumbling today.
Absolutely.
Crumbling.
And I'm scratching my head now, and I'm just wondering, I mean, for someone with a naval background, why sports?
Well, sports was, we did sports in the Navy.
Right.
So when I started doing commentary, football commentaries, my father sent for me one Sunday and he said, look, I hear you make all the noise on the radio on Sunday afternoons. Who taught you to play football? Because he knew he didn't allow me to play football.
Yeah.
And I played football in the Navy. In the Navy, you see, we have shore establishment and establishment afloat. And when you went to sea, maybe 3 months, 4 months, you came back, then you went into the shore establishment. And everything was properly arranged. We had physical education, you know, football, boxing. I was boxing in the Navy.
Oh, you were?
I was. And
You
one
beat
day
a couple
I
of
was
people?
beaten by one chap.
You were beaten?
Yeah, we had flotilla competition.
Okay.
And I was representing the supply division where I was.
Goodness.
I fought against a guy called Cook Bex, a stocky chap
Where is he from?
from Sierra Leone.
Okay.
And unfortunately, I took my training lightly. So when we got into the ring, the man didn't give me time even to settle down. And I had to surrender.
You surrendered at which round? First round?
The first round. I couldn't go
You
the second.
couldn't go anymore.
That was my achievement in the Navy,
Right.
in the boxing.
At least you knew a little bit
Yes.
about boxing.
And we
as
were
well.
doing footballing. And then when I got into teaching, we were doing sport.
Right.
I was doing a lot of sport, especially sport organization. You know, I was organizing meetings and so on and so forth, till I got into GBC.
Tell us about your first commentary, your first day on the job as a commentator for the GBC.
Yeah, well, you see, in those days, you didn't go into commentary immediately you joined. You had to be initiated into it. So for a start, you were doing summaries during halftime, halftime summaries. Then from halftime summaries, you did 15-minute commentary, you know, and then you had to be supervised in the act. At the end of it, they will play back the tape, they point out your mistakes to you. Then after that, you do 45 minutes, that's first half, second half, you know, and gradually you start doing the full match. So I can't remember exactly when it's a long time ago, you know, but I can remember my experiences. At the beginning, I used to have the GTS. So I made it a point to study this profession, to study it well. And we were using English most of the time. So I had to make sure I understood the English
And
language.
you'd have to have a lot of diction
Of
in
course.
order to be a good commentator.
Yes, you have to, because you're doing description.
So how were you doing it?
You know, we didn't have TV at that time.
Right.
So everybody depended on our description to be able to be transported to the venue of whatever we were describing. And if you were poor in your vocabulary, especially description, then you couldn't do it. So I had to make sure I had a good grounding in the English language, and it has helped me.
By reading a lot?
Just reading a lot, listening to radio. In that time, it was BBC all the time. And BBC, they command the Queen's language, the Queen's English. And then I used to travel from Kwanyaku to Legon to listen to a man called Professor Birmingham. he was teaching economics, and I was preparing to take the GCE in economics. It was then a new subject in Ghana. So I used to travel at the weekend all the way to Lagos, sit and listen to this man for 2 hours, and then traveled back. So you can see. And you had to do it. We at the time, we were chasing knowledge. This time, knowledge is chasing you. You know, you have the internet. What is it that you want that you wouldn't get today?
And so we have a lot. But your time, you were a bit limited. You had to,
yes,
go at all lengths in order to
even
get the knowledge.
in the question, in the very basic question of seeking information. Look, a foreign team has arrived in Ghana.
Yes.
And as a commentator, you should know about the background of the team. You have to chase these people, go to the hotel. The whole weekend, you'll be hunting for the team manager or the captain. It was no joke.
So journalism was hard.
It was very hard, very exacting. That's a word for it. It turned you inside out. You
Right.
had to forget about your personal leisure and dedicate yourself to the job. Look for information, cross-check. So you go on air with facts. And that was it. That was the drill.
And how old were you then?
Oh, how?
How old when you started the
GBC.
broadcasting?
Oh, GBC, I started in 61. I was born 27. I was around 30 something.
That's your youthful.
Yes, so I gave
So you
my.
didn't have a social life, meaning you didn't have time to go look for
the little
Mrs.
time we had. The little time we had, we took advantage of it.
Right.
Yes, I can tell you that.
So Mrs. was somewhere in the background there.
Oh, yeah, of course. I mean, she had all the patience, and occasionally we had disagreement over my staying out too long and running around with friends, and it was interesting.
You needed to do that because you needed the information.
Yes, you needed to do that. You needed to relax.
Yes.
If you didn't relax, you could kill yourself. People died in GBC from exertion, too much work, and we managed to combine work with leisure. It's really
How
good.
do they complement each other, work and leisure?
Well, I mean, when you have a bit of leisure, reasonable leisure, you are able to perform better. Yes.
For a commentator, I guess.
Yes, for a commentator, for any broadcaster,
Right.
and for that matter, any profession, any calling. If when you are able to judiciously blend your rest periods with work, you perform better. If you become a workaholic, and you're always on the job, you become stale. It's like a boxer who trains too much. He gets into the ring and he's stiff.
I guess you trained too much and you were beaten during the first round.
I didn't train.
Well, okay.
That was my problem.
Okay, let's now go back to your working days, and I know you were involved in some level of advocacies and all that.
That's right. Advocacy, trade union activity.
How did that go too?
That's a side of my life a lot of people don't know about. I was the divisional secretary of the Public Services Workers Union for GBC for 6 years, and there was a lot of injustice at GBC then, a lot of it. Backbiting, undermining, and unfair decisions by management and the rest of it. And I had to carry the flag. On one occasion, we wanted to hold a meeting on the lawns in GBC, and management refused. And you know what I did? I led a group of about 300 members of staff to TUC building, and there we held a meeting. A week later, management wrote me a letter why I should not be dismissed. But somehow I managed to wriggle out of it.
How did you do it?
Well, the query, what brought about the query? The evening news at that time, a newspaper, the evening news, came out with a picture of the meeting we held at the TUC. And in that meeting, I told the members what management had said, what decision they had taken, which had led us to the place. And management thought I had revealed management decision to the public. So they wrote me a letter, and they wanted to dismiss me on that. Unfortunately for them, they said the caption under the photo said this by evening news sports reporter, something, evening news reporter. That was the caption. And when I challenged management, because I wasn't working with the evening news. So right there on the spot, they took the query from me and tore it into bits.
And they let matters go.
Yeah, they let matters lie, you know. And there were so many experiences like that I had.
But you were fighting for...
I was fighting
right
for fairness.
Exactly.
For good working conditions, good staff relationships, and so on. And it was during my time we introduced what you call negotiations between management and staff. And the first time this idea was brought up, it was Kwesi Pratt's father who tutored me. He tutored me in the ways of the union. The first time we broached the question of negotiations between management and staff on working conditions and so on, my management had a shock. I remember the senior administrative officer then said, Mr. Joe Lartey, how can employers negotiate with their employees about conditions of service? It's unheard of. And I said, this is done. Then we had some literature from Canadian broadcasting, and the TUC was following that, and eventually it was established. And I remember it was around 1968 that we did it. And it has come to stay.
And so amongst your colleagues, you were more like a hero.
Of course, I must pay tribute to the confidence, the loyalty of the staff of GBC at that time. On one occasion, I was given a very bad treatment. I was suspended from work for a month without pay, and the members of staff contributed money for me. I had more than my pay for that month. I haven't forgotten it. We haven't got time. Otherwise, I tell you so many. Yeah.
But you see, today you sit back comfortably. Yeah. And you're revered so much. A lot of people say good things about you.
I'm interested.
Yes, and you also watch the younger ones get into these professions you've been into before.
That's exactly why I'm still teaching.
Right.
I want to download my experience and expertise to those who are coming up. And it's one of my serious ambitions in life today. Because after all, why should I take it to the grave? We don't have a lot of specialists in that field, especially in the field of TV and radio. We don't have many people who have deep in the dye. So whatever knowledge, whatever experience I have, let me leave it to the coming generation. It's my passion.
But are you doing this because you feel the coming generation are not getting certain things right?
Yeah, I think
so.
What are they? Yeah, for instance, today we have state radio, GBC, the only state radio, and then the rest of the stations are commercial. Commercial broadcasting is different. It's quite different from state radio broadcasting. The discipline is different. The objectives. Well, with the commercial, you want money. With the state radio, you want to galvanize the public to do the right things, to follow government policy, and so on. And it looks as if the way we started our commercial broadcasting, the guidelines are not very clear. So a lot of people are doing things on commercial broadcasting that ought not to be done.
Give me examples.
For instance, there was this program called Obadana on the Peace. They've watered it down a lot. But when it started, it was pure spoken pornography. That was what it was. It was so nasty. And I used to say, why? What is this? Radio is very sensitive, extremely sensitive. So what you say on radio, you can't say it, elsewhere. You can't say it at the beach.
And so you wish the experience you got at GBC could transcend to, the private sector, the
Yeah,
commercial radio?
it could transcend with some editing.
Right.
Let me put it that way, some editing, because commercial broadcasting is out to make profit, and if they're going to be as clean and as straight as state broadcasting, they won't have the profit. Commercial broadcasting, the person who comes to ask for airtime and pays for it has some influence on what you do.
Okay.
It's not so in state broadcasting. Now, GBC has a commercial wing, but if you listen to GBC, you can tell clearly without thinking that there's some control, which is not the case in the commercial side. I hear people asking for all sorts of
But
things.
there are bodies that are supposed to be checking on all this.
I don't think the bodies are very much aware. I don't know. I keep asking questions. What is the Media Commission for? I hope they will pardon me for saying this, but it doesn't look as if they are on the ball. I don't think so. Maybe they have problems. I've not yet been able to read the LI, the legislative instrument setting up the Media Commission. So I don't know the limits. I intend doing a bit of research into it, because I think a whole lot of things are going on that should be checked. And the speech, the people, the way people speak on our stations, they're keeping the nation a little on edge. We have ethics of public speaking.
Okay, we'll get into that when we come back from the break. This is still PM Express personality profile. Our guest is Joe Lartey, seasoned broadcaster. He's been in the Navy. He's still teaching and doing a lot of great things for Mother Ghana. When we come back from the break, we'll again tap into his experience and get his thoughts on some unfolding events in the country. Stay tuned. Welcome back. It's still PM Express personality profile. We're still here with Joe Lartey, and apparently I'm told Joe Lartey Jr. will be coming around, so you wouldn't see him on TV, but we'll enjoy ourselves here at Alisa Hotel. As you can see, we are really having fun here on PM Express at Alisa Hotel. But quickly to some unfolding events in the country. Before we even get to that, what do you make of the current crop of commentators? Whenever you tune in to radio or watch them on TV.
The current crop of commentators, they have talent. Some of them are highly talented, and I wouldn't take that from them. I can never. But they need training. They need to be molded. Talent needs to be polished. And I think that's about all. They need to know some of the principles of commentating.
What are those principles?
One, for instance, when you're doing a match, every few minutes you got to announce the score.
Right.
What's the score? I listen to them and 30 minutes straight for no score. It's a wrong principle. Again, you don't have to criticize a referee. You don't have to insult a referee.
Even if you're a Ghana commentator,
yes,
Ghana versus USA.
You as a commentator, you are supposed to be neutral. You're supposed to be in the middle, so you may show passion for your country, but don't overdo it. Everything you do, you need to be wary.
How are you able to hold yourself? I mean, in your time, how
yes,
were you doing
I
it?
remember when I was doing commentaries. On one occasion, we went out to the Congo for a match. It was a sizzling encounter, and when we came back, the late Ohinijam called me and he said, "Mr. Joe Lartey, are you a Ghanaian?" Then I said, "But why do you ask me such a question?" He said, "Oh, you don't show it in your commentary." And I said, "Yes, I'm not supposed to do that. I may indicate, but I'm not supposed to come out openly in defense."
How do you indicate that?
When Roy Ankra,
Right.
this chap, Fred Robertson, fought Ramos in Accra, 1964. The decision was booed. The decision that went in favor of Ramos was not popular. And the politicians jumped into the ring and started making statements. From the ring, they gave the judges time to leave Ghana. And then this one spoke, that one spoke. Then there was one very popular sports writer with a graphic. The name, something, yeah. He pushed the microphone into it, said, what do you think of it, Joe Lartey? And there I was. I knew I had to be neutral. So you know what I said? On the spur of the moment, I said, whether the decision was right or wrong, whether the referee was right or wrong, whether this one was right, this is sport, and that's about that.
That's it.
You know? And the next day, the BBC Sports Roundup, they played back that thing and said the only sane person around the ring was the commentator. You know?
Sane.
Yeah.
Oh, we take that.
Yeah. That's what it is.
Lightly. We'll take it lightly.
Yeah.
But looking around us, we have the World Cup going on in Brazil.
That's right.
What do you make of the Black Stars?
Look, let me tell you one thing. The African teams and their handlers, they've not got the culture of the World Cup yet.
Right.
If you look at the training sessions of some of the teams they are facing, they are even doing too well to be where they are. Because I listened to an interview between the BBC sports people and the USA handler, the coach. Yeah, about 2 weeks before the match, before the start.
Yeah.
And what that man said, I said to myself, I said, look, what the man was talking about, I don't think anybody on the GFA had ever even thought of it. You see, he was going deep. He was looking at the environment of each player.
Exactly.
What they were from, they've traced their. Look at it, at the last match, the coach dropped some of the important, the people we thought were the giants. They were dropped. Why? Here they would say, oh, no.
So you think the coach is not doing well?
Which our coach?
Kwesi Appiah.
Kwesi Appiah is doing very well. I have always advocated the engagement of a national, of an indigenous coach. I've always stood for that. You see, but then the indigenous coaches have got to learn. They've got to research. They've got to train themselves from time to time as soon as there's an opportunity. Because football today is scientific and it's very dynamic. And if you don't keep up with it, you'll be left out.
Very well. Now we've got a few minutes to go.
Yeah.
Final one. The FA is being indicted in a match fixing scandal. What's your thoughts?
I don't have the facts. I heard of it yesterday.
Right.
And it's only now that I'm beginning to hear the story. So it will be difficult to say anything by way of this way or that.
What do you
but
think?
let me say, I trust Nyantichi, I trust him. He's a gentleman. And I believe that he is sufficiently honest not to engage in a thing like this to the detriment of Ghana. No, I don't think so. I don't think he will. If they're putting it on him, he has I hear it's going to go to court. If it goes to court, he is a lawyer. He's got lawyer friends. He's got lawyer. I think he should be able to exonerate himself from this filthy thing. But I don't believe that Kwesi Nyantechi will get himself soiled, mired in a dirty thing like this. I don't think so.
Very well. Yeah. Thank you very much for being here with us, Joe Lartey.
Thank you.
I wish you could say over to me, Prince Nick, and then we can wrap up.
Oh, well, over to you, Jimmy. You know, I was at Aburigels at the weekend. I gave him a talk and then I gave him a song. And it was a happy occasion.
Right.
I was so happy. Yippee, ya, ya, yippee. That's a song.
Yippee, ya,
ya, yippee. Yippee, ya.
Yeah.
I got it from the Navy.
All right, so over to
you.
me. Thank you very much. And that'll be it for Personality Profile on PM Express. I am Prince Mika, sitting in again for Nana Ansakwa the 4th. Good night.